So I'm now ready to sew up the patch. For those of you who don't do a lot of sewing, there's different kinds of needles to use for different kinds of projects. So I'm going to use a sharp. Sharp has a small hole. It's got a graduated width from the tip, which is very sharp and small, to the top. You can have different lengths of sharps. I'm using a sort of a medium small sharp just because I like working with that size. And I'm now going to use a kind of thread that's called jeans thread, or thread that you would use on jeans. It's quite thick and heavy. And how I measure my length of thread is that I make one arm length, a second arm length, because I like to double my threads. Almost all my sewing is done with double threads. And then a teeny bit extra. And give it a little snip. You'll see I use a thimble. That's to save myself from puncturing my skin. So in its doubled length, it's a little bit more than my arm. I bring the two ends together, and then I make a knot. My first stitch is actually going to be on the back side, where I will attach the knot by making a little stitch on the inside of the jeans. And threading my needle between the two threads, it catches at that knot, and then I poke through the patch plus the original jeans, and I'm ready to do my stitching. I'm leaving this as raw edge. Almost all my patchwork and my sewing, not all of it, but a lot of it I do raw edge when I'm doing patchwork. But I use a particular kind of embroidery stitch to attach the patch and to prevent a lot of fraying. So I'm going to do my usual pattern that I like to make on corners. It's kind of pretty. Now, and one of the things, you won't be able to see this because it's the color of the thread matches the jeans too much to make it very visible, but that's kind of like what my client wanted for these, not too flashy. Me, on the other hand, I would have probably picked a color like orange or pink or green, because I like to show my sewing on my personal clothing. This is not my personal clothing. Anyway, one of the things that a part of mending life is actually to think about the word mend, to mend. You know, when we mend something, what are we doing? We're bringing it back to wholeness. We're creating resilience. We are fixing. But we're not doing it in a way where we're erasing our tracks, at least with visible mending and patchwork. You are enhancing. You're adding to the stories. You are adding layers, bringing a new meaning to a garment. And that can be really powerful when we think about what it means to mend, fix, make whole, remake. Make resilient. Add layers of love and story. Mending. And patchwork of our lives. Mending relationships. Mending the messes we have made. And oh, I have made messes in my life, but I've also worked to make amendments or to patch up, to find the ways to be stronger and more resilient as a result of the holes. The tears and the rips. Sometimes that work is done silently, it's done unilaterally, like me with myself. Sometimes it's done relationally, me with the other. Sometimes not. There's still prayers of love that get put out. Just like the kinds of prayers that we can create when we are doing our sewing work. Binding. So one of the other things we can think about is this idea of binding. What does it mean to bind, to ply, to weave, to spin? You know, when we're working with textiles and fibers, it's actually really it's an act of binding our intentions and prayers to that which we are creating or mending in this case. You know, it's done with intention. You don't just put in your negative moods. Hopefully what you're doing is you're putting in power, resilience, care, prayers for well-being. Because as I pull my thread, I bind what I've been thinking about, feeling to the fabric. It becomes a part of it. So I want to approach this with the awareness that every act, including things like mending, especially things like mending, sewing, embroidering, weaving, we're literally weaving the fabric of life in the universe. Sometimes when I'm making my videos, you will probably see my tattoo. I got these for my menopause graduation. It was very intentional. In the planning phase of it took, I guess it was a year and a half. It was when COVID was in place, and the tattoo artist is a friend, and so we mailed through snail mail back and forth the design ideas until we had the right design, shape, size for here. And this is a figure called Mokash. Mokash is like a very old Slavic form of Mother Earth, representation of Mother Earth. And in her hands, she'll either have fiber and a spindle, so she's spinning the fates. She governs things like weaving, earth, water, women, moon, waters of life. But she'll also sometimes be holding grains or sometimes birds, just to show the different relationships she has with fertility, abundance, joy, life energies. So because she spins the fates and has a hand in destiny, our destiny, one of the things that you're doing when you're doing something like a mending project is that you are a part of that, a part of weaving the fate by what you impart into your stitches. If you like to do handwork and as you're doing handwork, listening to like a podcast or you have something on in the background like a movie or whatever, choose wisely the energy that you're connecting with while you're doing your mending, your weaving, your sewing. Or maybe just simply be present with yourself and with the fibers that you're working with. There's a lot of ways to do it.